Baseball today and tonight. This afternoon, Royals Blue Jays. That's 4:07 Eastern. Chris Young against R.A. Dickey. And then later on tonight, Jacob deGrom and Kyle Hendricks. It'll be the Cubs Mets. That's Game 3. Tom Verducci, the Sports Illustrated senior baseball writer, also part of the booth on Fox with Joe Buck, Harold Reynolds. They called the Blue Jays Royals festivities last night. Before I get to the overall game there, Tom, I wanted to ask you about that moment where Tulowitzki and John Hirschbeck had their little tete-a-tete, their stare down there. This has happened before many times. But why does baseball like this, I guess? Does the commissioner like the umpires to be this way?
You mean obvious in a game? No. They much prefer they be non-confrontational. You always have to give the player that moment of reacting. Now, I think Hirschbeck's contention was that Tulo was chirping all game long, and it was one of those, one more thing and I'm going to throw you, and he did. But I think especially in a postseason environment, you have to really be disciplined as an umpire in terms of walking away, letting some things go. Now, listen, I don't know exactly what was said, but Tulo made it sound like it was not worth getting thrown out of the game. So it was a shame that it happened. Good thing it wasn't a close game, obviously. But, you don't see it often, Dan. Postseason scenario, a guy is walking out to his position at shortstop and gets thrown out of the game from about 90 feet away.
Yeah, it was strange. And I know there's a way of saying, instead of saying that wasn't a strike, you can say, where was that pitch? Or keep your head down. They don't want to be shown up. And Tulowitzki went about it probably incorrectly according to the unwritten rules of baseball. I'm just surprised that we're still doing this nonsense. Joe West does it where I'm going to stare you down. And, I just get bored by it. And I always feel like the best umpire is the umpire I don't hear his name because he's probably done a damn good job.
I totally agree with that. And keep this in mind, though, Dan. That bench in Toronto is notorious for just riding umpires. It's not just one game. It's not just one series. They will complain about as much as anybody, whether in the batter's box or from the bench.
How do you explain last night?
Well, Johnny Cueto just left too many balls over the plate. There's no doubt about that. And this Toronto lineup didn't see much to hit the first two games. So getting back home, ball carrying, indoor environment rather than big park, colder weather in Kansas City, all the ingredients were there for something combustible. The spark you needed was balls left over the plate. And Johnny Cueto did that. I mean, he was not good at all. This team, I'm telling you, when they score a run, I'm talking about Toronto, they do come in bunches. And it doesn't matter where they are in the lineup. It seems once they get things going, they are hard to stop. Very few one-run innings for that team.
Where would you put this lineup, though, historically? And I guess recent memory.
I've been saying this is an old-school lineup in that it brings us back to pre-testing days. 3 guys with 39 home runs. There's only 4 teams in history that have done that. The run differential is the greatest since 2001 in terms of outscoring opponents. All the numbers that show up in Toronto, nobody has done since we started testing for PEDs in 04. So I'm calling that old school, even though it's about 10 or 12 years ago. But it's been a long time since we've seen the lineup this deep and with this much power.
He's Tom Verducci of Sports Illustrated, also Fox. They got the game this afternoon, Royals and Blue Jays, and then it's the Mets and the Cubs coming up later tonight. I don't know Paulie, do you have the weather conditions at Wrigley?
It's going to be wind about 6 miles an hour, a little blustery with rain, but not supposed to be windy.
Yeah, that might not be good enough against Jacob deGrom. I was amazed that the Cubs are a feast or famine team. Historically, where do they rank as far as home run to strikeout ratio?
Well, I mean, if they happen to get to the World Series, they'd have the most strikeouts of any team, surpassing the 13 Red Sox. But it's more, I think, looking at this series, Dan, it's a bad matchup for Chicago because the Mets just have premium velocity. I mean, does anybody there throw under 95 miles an hour? And the Cubs, with that, what you're referring to, the power strikeout ratio, they're vulnerable to velocity, especially well located, and they're getting a steady diet of it. I mean, it doesn't get any easier tonight with deGrom. Obviously, it's a must-win, not mathematically, but it is a must-win. You don't want to get down 3-0. And I think if deGrom just completely dominates the game, he could just, and I know it's a young team, he could just sap the spirit of the Cubs. And that series could be over tomorrow. I mean, that's how big tonight's game is, especially with how deGrom pitches tonight.
The whole Matt Harvey situation now with the swelling in his right arm, how concerned should the Mets be about this?
Really concerned. I mean, the danger is that, Matt's going to say, no, I'm good, a little bit of swelling. I threw a bullpen, it was fine. But, if you're compensating at all for something that's not right in the arm area or even the lower half, that's how you really get hurt. So forget about the innings limits. And I'm amazed that his arm has stayed on, by the way, after 180 innings. But, you don't want him going out there trying to compensate for something, even if it sounds minor. If he gets out of his usual mechanics, that could be a problem. So I think obviously the Mets are going to be very careful. They're not going to take a risk with this guy, but you have to don't leave it in Harvey's hands because he's going to say he wants the ball.
Have fun later on today. Tell the boys we said hello. Tom, thanks for joining us.
You got it, Dan. Have a good one.
That's Tom Verducci, Sports Illustrated, also calling the game.